Hi, good evening. It's Wednesday. It's our night. We are set up. Oh, guys, Wednesdays just make me happy. I'm going to adjust a little bit, bring it a little closer, just a little closer. That's a little better. But yeah, I am so incredibly grateful for our Wednesdays. And I'm just feeling happy today. So we're going to enjoy that. It's a little bittersweet that we are finally on our last story in this book. Ah, that's so good. I know I say that about all of our spicy drinks from Foxington Manor, but this meat is really good. So yeah, it is officially summer now. So why not dress accordingly? Got my Hawaiian shirt on tonight. And yeah, so we are on our last story. Tonight's story is called The Red Stockade. It is a little short, or at least shorter than the last couple have been. And then, yeah, so next week we will start on something new. And I've been checking comments to see which of these we are going to read, whether it's going to be our Nathaniel Hawthorne or the Irish fairy tales. I think I'm leaning towards the fairy tales just because it's summer and fairy stories and all of that. And then we'll be into Hawthorne by the fall, which means because there are a couple of these that are a little spooky. So we can kind of set those up around Halloween. Halloween. Oh, it's gonna be great. You guys, there's stuff in the works again, and it's so great that you guys are here with me, and we're gonna take this little trip, this little adventure together. I've had evidence of some really big support over the last couple of days. So those of you that do this kind of thing know that you can get very discouraged. But when members of your tribe show that they support you, it means the world. So I'm going to get emotional before the story instead of after. But no, I'm not, because it's a good day. And we've got folks here together. I've got folks that are watching after, which is fantastic. If this comes across here for you while you're at work on a Thursday, and that's when you get to watch or listen, I think that's great. I just want to be able to keep sharing these with you guys. So we'll keep going on. Definitely be a different vein starting next week. But I hope you guys haven't too been surprised by some of these short stories. And I know, I'm sorry, I was just dead handing with my glass there. But again, thank you so, so much. Please, 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 we'll get this out of the way now. Please like these videos. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Please share. The more views, the more people that get to hang out with us on Wednesdays or later, the better. Because we're going to keep pushing forward on this. I love our Wednesdays, like I said, and I can't wait to see where we are at a year from now. So, thank you again so much. And tonight we are going to be reading The Red Stockade, a story told by the old Coast Guard. So, thank you guys. And we'll take one more drink. And we'll jump on in. We was on the southern part of the China station when the George Ranger was ordered to the Straits of Malacca to put down the pirates that had been showing themselves of late. It was in the 40s, when ships was ships, not iron kettles full of wheels, and other devilments, and there was a chance of hand-to-hand fighting, not being blown up in an iron cellar by you don't know who. Ships was ships in them days. There had been a lot of throat cutting and scuttling, for them devils stopped at nothing. Some of us had been through the straits before when we was in the Polyphemus, 74, going to the China station. And although we had never come to quarters with the Malays, we had seen some of their work and knew what kind they was. So when we had left Singapore in the George Ranger, for that was our saucy little 38-gun frigate, the place wasn't in them days what it is now. Many and many's the yarn was told in the forecastle and on the watches of what the yellow devils could do and had done. Some of us took it one way and some another, but all, save a few, wanted to get into hand grips with the pirates for all their creases and their stink pots and the devil's engines what they used. There was some that didn't mind cold steel of an ordinary kind and would have faced cutlasses and boarding pikes any day for a holiday. But that didn't like the idea of those knives like crooked flames that sliced a man in two and hacked through the bowels of him. Naturally, we didn't take much stock of this kind, and many's the joke we had on them, some of them cruel enough jokes too. You may be sure those good stories, with plenty of cutting and blood and torches in 'em, told in their watches, and nigh the whole ship's crew was busy, day and night, remembering and inventing things that'd make 'em gasp and grow white. I think that somehow the captain and the officers must have known what was going on, for there came tales from the wardroom that was worse nor worse nor any of ours. The midshipmen used to delight in them, like the ship's boys did, and one of them that had a crease used to bring it out when he could, and show how the pirates used it when they cut the hearts out of men and women and ripped them up to the chins. It was a bit cruel at times on them poor white-livered chaps. A man can't help his liver, I suppose. But anyhow, there's no place for them in a warship, for they're apt to do more harm by living where there's men's of all sorts than they can do by dying. So there wasn't any mercy for them, and the captain was worse on them than any. Captain Wynyard was him that commanded the corvette Sentinel on the China station, and was promoted to the George Ranger for cutting up a fleet of junks that was hammering on the Rajah from Canton, racing for Southampton with the first of the season's tea. He was a man, if you like, a bulldog full of hellfire when he was on for fighting. He wouldn't have a white liver at any price. God hates a coward, he said once, and under Her Britannic Majesty, I'm here to carry out God's will. Trice him up and give him a dozen. At least, that's the story they tell of him when he was around Shanghai. And one of his men had held back when the time came for boarding a fire junk that was coming down the tide. And with that, he went in and steered her off with his own hands. Well, the captain knew what work there was before us, and that it weren't no time for kid gloves and hair oil, much less a bogey in your buttonhole and a top hat. And he didn't mean that there should be any funk on his ship. So you take your Davy that it wasn't his fault if things was made too pleasant aboard for men what feared falling into the clutches of the Malays. Now and then he went out of his way to be nasty over such folk, and boy or man, he never checked his tongue on a hard word when anyone's face was pale before him. There was one old chap on board that we called Old Land's End, for he came from that part, and that had a boy of his on the Billy Ruffian when he sailed on her and after got lost one night in cutting out a Greek sloop at Navarino in 1827. We used to chaff him when there was trouble with any of the boys, for he used to say that his boy might have been in that trouble too. And now, when the chaff was on about being afeard of the Malays, we used to rub it into the old man. He would flame up and answer us that his boy had died in his duty, and that he couldn't be afeard of naught. One night, there was a row on among the midshipmen, for they said that one of them, Tempest by name, owned up to being afraid of being creased. He was a rare, bright little chap of about 13 that was always in fun and trouble of some kind, but he was soft-hearted, and sometimes the other lads would tease him. He would own up truthfully to anything he thought or felt, and now they had drawn him to own something that none of them would, no matter how true it might be. Well, they had a rare fight, for the boy was never backward with his fists, and by accident it came to the notice of the captain. He insisted on being told what it was all about, and when young Tempest spoke out and told him, he stamped on the deck and called out, "I'll have no cowards in this ship," and was going on when the boy cut in. "I'm no coward, sir. I'm a gentleman." "Did you say you were afraid? Answer me, yes or no." "Well, yes, sir, I did, and it was true. I said that I feared the Malay creases, but I did not mean to shirk them for all that. Henry of Navarre was afraid, but all the same Henry of Navarre be damned," shouted the captain. "And you too. You said you were afraid, and that, let me tell you, is what we call a coward in the Queen's Navy. And if you are one, you can at least have the grace to keep it to yourself. No answer to me. To the masthead for the remainder of the day. I want my crew to know what to avoid, and to know it when they see it." And he walked away, while the lad, without a word, ran up to the main top. Hmm. Some way, the men didn't say much about this. The only one that said anything to the point was Old Land's End, and says he, "That may be a coward, but I'd chance it that he was a boy of mine." As we went up the straits and got the sun on us, and the damp heat of that kettle of a place, Lord bless you, you steam there all day and all night like a copper at the galley. We began to look around for the pirates, and there wasn't a man that got drowsy on the watch. We coasted along as we went up north, and took a look into the creeks and rivers as we went. It was up these that the Malays hid themselves, for the fevers and such that swept off their betters like flies didn't seem to have any effect on them. There was pretty bad bits, I tell you, up some of them rivers through the mango groves, where the marshes spread away, mile after mile as far as you could see, and where everything that is noxious, both beast and bird and fish and crawling thing, and insect and tree and bush and flower and creeper, is most at home. But the pirate ships kept ahead of us, or if they came south again, passed us by in the night. And so we ran up till about the middle of the peninsula, where the worst of the piracies had happened. There we got up as well as we could to look like a ship in distress. And sure enough, we deceived the beggars, for two of them came out early dawn and began to attack us. They was an ugly looking craft too, long, low hull and lateen sails, and a double crew twice told in every one of them. I'm going to try that phrase again because it makes no sense. Let me see if I can lock it in. And a double crew twice told in every one of them. I don't know what that phrase means. If you guys have any ideas, put it in the comments. But if the crafts was ugly, the men was worse, for uglier devils I never saw. Swarthy yellow chaps, some of them, and some with shaven crowns and white eyeballs, and others as black as your shoe, with one or two white men, more shame among them, but all carrying creases as long as your arm and pistols in their belts. They didn't get much change from us, I tell you. We let them get close and then gave them a broadside that swept their decks like a hailstorm. But we was unlucky that we didn't grapple them, for they managed to shift off and ran for it. Our boats was out quick, but we daren't follow them where they ran into a wide creek, with mango swamps on each side as far as the eye could reach. The boat came back after a bit, and reported that they had run upriver, which was deep enough, but with a winding channel between great mud banks where alligators lay in hundreds. There seemed to be some sort of fort where the river narrowed, and the pirates ran in behind it and disappeared up the bend of the river. Then the preparations began. We knew that we had got 2 craft, at any rate, caged in the river, and there was every chance that we had found their lair. Our captain wasn't one that let things go asleep, and by daylight the next morning we was ready for an attack. The pinnace and 4 other boats started out under the first lieutenant to prospect, and the rest that was left on board waited, as well as they could, till we came back. That was an awful day. I was in the second boat, and we all kept well together when we began to get into the narrows of the mouth of the river. When we started, we went in a couple of hours after the flood tide, and so all we saw when the light came seemed fresh and watery. But as the tide ran out, and the big black mud banks began to show their heads above everywhere, it wasn't nice, I can tell you. It was hardly possible for us to tell the channels, for everywhere the tide raced quick. It was only when the boat began to touch the black slime that you knew you was on a bank. Twice our boat was almost caught this way, but by good luck we pulled and pushed off in time into the ebbing tide, and hardly a boat but touched somewhere. One that was a bit out from the rest of us got stuck at last in a nasty cut between 2 mud banks, and as the water ran away, the boat turned over the slope, despite all her crew could do, and we saw the poor fellows thrown into the slime. Ooh. More than one of them began to swim toward us, but behind each came a rush of something dark, and though we shouted and made what noise we could, and fired many shots, the alligators was too close. It was shriek after shriek. They went down to the bottom of the filth and slime. Oh man, it was a dreadful sight, and none the better that it was new to nigh all of us. How it would have taken of us if we'd had time to think about it, I hardly know, but I doubt then more that a few would have grown cold over it. But just then there flew amongst us a hail of small shot from a fleet of boats that had stolen down on us. They drove out from behind a big mud bank that rose steeper than the others, and that seemed solider too, for the gravel of it showed, as the scour of the tide washed the mud away. We was not sorry, I tell you, to have men to fight with, instead of alligators and mud banks, in an ebbing tide in a strange tropical river. We gave chase at once, and the pinnace fired the 12-pounder which she carried in the bows. And among the huddle of the boats and the yells arose the rush of the alligators turned to where the Malay heads bobbed up and down in the drift of the tide. Then the pirates turned and ran, and we after them as hard as we could pull, till round a sharp bend of the river we came to a narrow place, where one side was steep for a bit, and then tailed away to a wilderness of marsh, worse than we had seen. The other side was crowned by a sort of fort, built on the top of a high bank, but guarded by a stockade and a mud bank which lay at its base. From this there came a rain of bullets, and we saw some guns turned toward us. We was hardly strong enough to attack such a position without I know this word, guys. I'm really sorry. Reconnoitering. That's not exactly right, but it's close. Sorry, Matthew. And so we drew away, but not quite quick enough. For before we could get out of range of their guns, a round shot carried away the whole of the starboard oars of one of our boats. It was a dreary pull to the ship, and the tide was against us, for we all got thinking of what we had to tell. One boat and crew lost entirely, and a set of oars shot away, and no work done. The captain was furious, and in the wardroom, and in the forecastle that night, and there was nothing that wasn't flavored with anger and curses. Even the boys of all sorts, from the cabin boys to the midshipmen, was wanting to get at the Malays. However, sharp was the order, and by daylight 3 boats was up at the stockaded fort, making an accurate survey. Sorry guys, we're gonna fidget just a little bit again. I was again in one of the boats, and in spite of what the captain had said to make all of us so angry, and he had a tongue like vitriol, I tell you, we all felt pretty down and cold when we got again amongst those terrible mud banks and saw the slime that shone on them bubble up, and when the gray of the morning let us see anything. We found that the fort was one that we would have to take if we wanted to follow the pirates up the river, for it barred the way without a chance. There was a gut of the river between the 2 great ridges of gravel, and this was the only channel where there was a chance of passing, but it had been staked on both sides, so that only the center was left free. Why, from the fort they could have stoned anyone in the boats passing there, only there wasn't any stone that we could see in their whole blessed country. When we got back, with 2 cases of sunstroke among us and reported, the captain ordered preparations for an attack on the fort, and the next morning the ball began. It was ugly work. We got close up to the fort, but as the tide ran out, we had to sheer away somewhat so as to not get stranded. The whole place swarmed with those grinning devils. They evidently had some way of getting to and from their boats behind the stockade. They did not fire a shot at us, not at first. And that was the most aggravating thing that you can imagine. They seemed to know something that we did not, and they only just waited. As the tide sank lower and lower, and the mudbanks grew steeper, and the sun on them began to fizzle, a steam arose that nigh turned our stomachs. Why, the sight of them alone would make your heart sink. The slime shimmered in all kinds of colors, like the water when there's tarring work on hand. And the whole place seemed alive with all that was horrible. The alligators kept off the boats and the banks close to us, but the thick water was full of eels and water snakes, and the mud was alive with waterworms and leeches and horrible gaudy colored crabs. The very air was filled with pests, flies of all kinds, and a sort of big striped insect that they called the tiger mosquito, which comes out in the daytime and bites you like red-hot pincers. It was bad enough, I tell you, for us men with hair on our faces, but some of the boys got very white and pale, and they was all pretty silent for a while. All at once, the crowd of Malays behind the stockade began to roll their eyes and wave their creases and to shout. We knew that there was some cause for it, but couldn't make it out, and this exasperated us more than ever. Then the captain sings out to us to attack the stockade, so we all jumped out into the mud. We knew it couldn't be very deep just there on account of the gravel beneath. We was knee-deep in a moment, but we struggled and slipped and fell over each other. And when we got to the top of that bank, we was the queerest, filthiest looking crowd you ever see. But the mud hadn't took the heart out of us, and the Malays, with their necks craned over the stockade, and with the nearest thing to a laugh or a smile that the devil lets them have, drew back and fell, one on another, when they heard our cheer. Between them and us, there was a bit of a dip where the water had been running in the ebb tide, but which seemed now as dry as the rest, and the foremost of our men charged down the slope, and then we knew why they had kept silent and waited. We was in a regular trap. The first ranks disappeared at once in the mud and ooze in the hollow, and those next were up to their armpits before they could stop. Then those Malay devils opened up on us, And while we tried to pull our chaps out, they mowed us down with every kind of small arm they had. And they had a queer assortment, I tell you. It was all we could do to get back over the slope into the boats again. Well, what was left of us. And as we hadn't hands enough left even to row with full strength, we had to make for the ship as fast as we could, for their boats began to pass out in a cloud through the narrow by the stockade. But before we went, we saw them dragging the live and dead out of the mud with hooks on the ends of long bamboos, and there was terrible shrieks from some poor fellows when the creases gashed through them. We daren't wait, but we saw enough to make us swear revenge. When we saw them devils stick the bleeding heads of our comrades on the spikes of the stockade, there was nigh a mutiny because the captain wouldn't let us go back and have another try for it. He was cool enough now, and those of us that knew him and understood what was in his mind, when the smile on him showed with the white teeth in the corners of his mouth, felt that it was no good day's work that the pirates had done for themselves. Probably not. Wonder what's going to happen. I don't really seeing much foreshadowing. This seems very, I'm not sure. Sorry, guys. I am just kind of all over the place tonight, I guess. I don't know. But we're just going to keep moving along. Yes. When we got back to the ship and told our tale, it wasn't long till the men was all on fire, and nigh every man took a turn with the grindstone at his cutlass, till they was all like razors. The captain mustered everyone on board, and detailed every man to his work in the boats, ready for the next time, and we knew that, by daylight, we were to have another slap at the pirates. We got 6-pounders and 12-pounders in most of the boats, for we was to give them a dose of big shot before we came to close quarters. Maybe. When we got up near the stockade, the tide had turned, and we thought it better to wait till dawn, for it was bad work among the mud banks at the ebb in the dark. So we hung on a while, and then when the sky began to lighten, we made for the fort. When we got nigh enough to see it, there wasn't a man of us who didn't want to have some bloody revenge, for there, on the spikes of the stockade, were the heads of all the poor fellows that we had lost the day before, with a cloud of mosquitoes and flies already beginning to buzz around them in the dawn. But beyond that again, they had painted the outside of the stockade with blood, so that the whole place was a crimson mass. You could smell it as the sun came up. Oh, gross. Well, that day was a hard one. We opened fire with our guns, and the Malays returned it with all they had. A fleet of boats came out from beyond the fort, and for a while we had to turn our attention to these. The small guns served us well, and we made a rare havoc among the boats, for our shot went crashing through them, and quite a half of them were sunk. The water was full of bobbing heads, but the tide carried them away from us, and their cries and shrieks came from beyond the fort and then died away. The other boats recognized their danger and turned and ran in through the narrow and let us alone for hours after. Then we went at the fort again. We turned our guns at the piles of the stockade, and of course, every shot told. But their fire was at too close quarters, and with their rifles and matchlocks and the rest, they picked us off too fast, and we had to sheer off where our heavy metal could tell without our being within their range. We had to sheer off where heavy metal could tell without our being within the range. Okay. Before we sheered off, we could see that the hole we had knocked in the stockade was only in the outer work, and that the real fort was within. Darn it. Of course. We had to go down the river, as we couldn't go far enough across. Oh my goodness. I am so sorry. That one just kind of smacked me. We had to go down the river, and as we couldn't get far enough across without danger from the banks, this only gave us a side view. And do what we couldn't make an impression, at least any that we could see. That was a long and awful day. The sun was blazing on us like a furnace, and we was nigh mad with heat and flies and drought and anger. It was that hot that if you touched metal, it fairly burned you. When the tide was near the flood, the captain ordered up the boats in the wide water now opposite the fort. And there, for a while, we got a fair chance till, when the ebb began, we should have to sheer off again. By this time, our shot was nearly run out, and we thought that we should have to give over. But all at once came order to prepare for attack. And in a few minutes, we was working for dear life across the river, straight for the stockade. The men set up a cheer, and the pirates showed over the top of the stockade and waved their creeses, and more than one of them sliced off pieces of the heads on the spikes and jeered at us, as much to say that they would do the same for us in our turn. When we got close up, every one of them had disappeared, and there was a silence at the grave. We knew that something was up, but what the move was we could not tell, till from behind the fort came rushing again a fleet of boats. We turned on them, and like we did before, we made mincemeat of them. This time the tide made for us, and the bobbing heads went by us in dozens. Now and then there was a wild yell, as an alligator pulled someone down into the mud. This went on for a little, and we'd beaten them off enough to be able to get our grappling irons ready for climbing the stockade, when the second lieutenant, who was in the outer boat, called out, "Back with the boats! Back, quick! The tide is falling!" And with one impulse we began to shove off. Then, in an instant, the place became alive again with the Malays, and they began firing on us so quickly that before we could get out into the whirl of tide, there was many a dead man in our boats. There was no use trying to do any more that day, and after we had done what could be done for the wounded, and patched up our boats, for there was plenty of shot holes to plug, we pulled back to the ship. The alligators had a good day. The alligators did have a good day. And as we went along, and the mud banks grew higher and higher with the falling of the tide, we could see them lie out lazily as if they had been gorged. Aye, and there was enough left for the ground sharks out in the offing. Okay. Are ground sharks a thing? Does anybody know if ground sharks are a thing? Because, okay, I'm going to squirrel for a moment because, again, it's what we do. I have a friend whose daughter plays softball, and I believe their team is like the land sharks or the ground sharks or something. Okay, this is not playing the way I want it to. So if ground sharks are a thing, somebody please let me know in the comments. Ground sharks, land sharks, or what they are. I don't know if they're like, I don't know. I'm sorry, but we're in the jungle. There's alligators. So I don't know if these are like Gila monster things. I don't know what ground sharks are. So yes, somebody please feel free to educate me, and I will go back and look at this. And if somebody has put in the comments, then next week, or I will just look it up. But yes, I need to know what ground sharks are and if they're a real thing or what they most closely resemble. So yes. And oh, there's a comment. can't read that. It's too far away. I apologize, but I will certainly go back and read it later. Heavy listening. Thank you for being here tonight. I was hoping you'd be here. We got 5 people. You guys, you're awesome. See, I'm just trying to keep smiling. And you guys are helping. So thank you. Anyway, ground sharks are going to get the leftovers from, yes, from the alligators. Okay. Are we all back together? I hope so. And there was enough left for the ground sharks out in the offing, for the men on board told us that every while on the ebb, something would go along, bobbing up and down in the swell, till presently there would be a swift ripple of a fin, and there was no more pirate. Man, that'd be weird. Anyway. Well, when we got aboard, the rest was mighty anxious to know what had been done. And when we began, with the heads on spikes of the Red Stockade, the men ground their teeth. And old Land's End up, he says, "The Red Stockade. We'll not forget the name. It'll be our turn next, and then we'll paint it inside this time." And so it was that we came to know the place by that name. That night, the captain was like a man that would do murder. His face was like steel, and his eyes was as red as flames. He didn't seem to have a thought for anyone, and everything he did was as hard as though his heart were brass. He ordered all that was needful to be done for the wounded, but added to the doctor, "And mind you, get them well as soon as you can. We're too short-handed already." Yikes. Up to now, we all had known him treat men as men, but now he only thought of us as machines for fighting. True enough, he thought the same of himself. Twice that very night, he cut up rough in a new way. Of course, the men was talking of the attack. There was lots of brag and chaff, for they were also grim earnest, and some of the old fooling went on about blood and tortures. The captain came on deck, and as he walked along, he saw one of the men that didn't like the creases, and he didn't evidently like the looks of him, for he turned on his heel and said savagely, "Send the doctor here." So the doctor came, and the captain, he says to him, cold as ice and polite as you please, "Dr. Fairbrother, there is a sick man here. Look at his pale face. Something wrong with his liver, I suppose. It's the only thing that makes a seaman's face white when there's fighting ahead. Take him down to sick bay and do something for him. I'd like to cut the accursed white liver out of him altogether." With that, he went down to his cabin. Well, if we was hot for fighting before, we was boiling after that. And we all came to know that the next attack on the Red Stockade would be the last, one way or another. We had to wait 2 more days before we could come off, for the boats and tackle had to be made ready, and there wasn't going to be any mistakes made this time. It was just after midnight when we began to get ready. Every man was to his post. The moon was up, and it was a lighter nor London day, and the captain stood by, saw every man to his place, and nothing escaped him. By and by, his number 6 boat was filling, and before the officer in charge of it got in, came the midshipman, young Tempest. And when the captain saw him, he called him up and hissed out before the crew, "Why are you so white? What's wrong with you anyways? Your liver out of order too?" True enough, the boy was white, but at the flaming insult, the blood rushed to his face, and we could see it red in the starlight. Then, in another moment, it passed away and left him paler than ever. And he said with a gentle voice, though standing as straight as a ramrod, "I can't help the blood in my face, sir. If I'm a coward because I'm pale, perhaps you are right, but I shall do my duty all the same." And with that, he pulled himself up, touched his cap, and went down into the boat. Old Land's End was behind me in the boat with him, number 5 to my 6, and he whispered to me through his shut teeth, "Too rough, that." He might have thought a bit that he's only a child, and he came all the same, even if he was afeard. We stole away with muffled oars and dropped silently into the river on the flood tide. If any man had had any doubts as to whether we was in earnest at other times, he had none then, anyhow. It was a pretty grim time, I tell you, for the most of us felt that whether we won or not this time, there would be many empty hammocks that night in the George Ranger. But we meant to win it, even if we went into the maws of the sharks and the crocodiles for it. Thought it was eels and alligators, but sharks and crocodiles works. When we came up close on the flood, we lost no time but was slap at the fort. At first, of course, we had crawled up the river in silence, but I think that we took the beggars by surprise, for we was there before the time they expected us. Howsomever, they turned out quick enough, and there was soon music on both sides of the stockade. We didn't want to take any chance on the mud banks this time, so we ran in close under the stockade at once and hooked on. We found that they had repaired the breach we had made the last time. I would hope so. They fought like devils, for they knew that we could beat them hand to hand if we could just once get in, and they sent round the boats to take us on the flank, as they had done each time before. But this time, we wasn't to be drawn away from our attack, and we let our boats outside tackle them while we minded our own business closer home. It was a long fight, and a bloody one. They was sheltered inside, and they knew that time was with them, for when the tide should have fallen, if we hadn't gotten in, we should have had our old trouble with the mudbanks all over again. But we knew it too, and we didn't lose no time. Still, men is only men after all, and we couldn't fly up over a stockade out of a boat. And them as did get up was sliced about dreadful. They're handy workmen with their creases, no doubt. We was so hot on the job we had on hand that we never took no note of time at all. And all at once we found the boat fixed tight underneath us. The tide had fallen and left us on the bank of the Red Stockade, and the best half of the boats was cut off from us. We had some 30 men left. We knew that we had to fight whether we liked it or not. It didn't much matter anyhow, for we was game to go through with it. The captain, when he seen the state of things, gave us orders to take the boats out into midstream and shell and shot the fort, while we was to do what we could to get in. There was no use trying to bridge over the slobs, for the mass of an old 74 wouldn't have done it. We was in a tight place then, I can tell you, between two fires, for the guns of the boats couldn't fire high enough to clear us every time without going over the fort altogether, and more than one of our own shots did some of us harm. Oops. The cutter came into the game and began sending the war rockets from the tubes. The pirates didn't like that, I tell you, and more betoken, no more did we, for we got as much of them as they did till the captain saw the harm to us and bade them cease. But he knew his business, and he kept all the fire of the guns on the one side of the stockade till he knocked a hole in that we could get in by. When this was done, the Malays left the outer wall and went within the fort proper. This gave us some protection, since they couldn't fire right down on us, and our guns kept the boats away that would have taken us from the riverside. But it was hot work, and we began dropping away with the stray shots and with the stink pots and hand grenades that they kept hurling over the stockades onto us. Gross. So the time came when we found that we must make a dash for the fort, or get picked out one by one where we stood. By this time, some of our boats was making for the opening, and there seemed less life behind the stockade. Some of them was up to some move, and was sheering off to make up some other devilment. Still, they had their guns in the fort, and there was danger to our boats if they tried to cross the opening between the piles. One did, and went down with a hole in her within a minute. So we made a burst on the stockade, and found ourselves in a narrow place between the two walls of piles. Anyhow, the place was drier, and we felt a relief in getting out of up to our knees in steaming mud. There was no time to lose, and the second lieutenant, Webster by name, told us to try to scale the stockade in front. It wasn't high, but it was slimy below and greasy above, and do what we would, it wouldn't get no nigher. We couldn't get no nigher. That's better. A shot from a pistol wiped out the lieutenant, and for a moment we thought we was without a leader. Young Tempest was with us, silent all the time, with his face as white as a ghost, though he had done his best like the rest of us. Suddenly he called out, "Here, lads, take and throw me in. I'm light enough to do it, and I know that when I am in, you'll all follow." Never a man stirred. Then the lad stamped his foot and called again, and I remember his young high voice now. "Seaman, to your duty, I command here." At the word, we all stood at attention, just as if we was at quarters. Then Jack Pring, that we called the giant, for he was 6'4" and strong as a bullock, spoke out. Sorry, guys, there's a hair on my face. I can absolutely feel it. "It's no duty, sir, to fling an officer into hell." The lad looked at him and nodded. "Volunteers for dangerous duty," he called, and every man of the crowd stepped out. "All right, boys," says he. "Now take me up and throw me in. We'll get down that flag anyhow." And he pointed to the black flag that the pirates flew on the flagstaff in the fort. Then he took the small flag of the float and put it on his breast, and says he, "This'll suit better." "Won't I do, sir?" said Jack, and the lad laughed a laugh that rang again. "Oh my eye," says he. "Has anyone got a crane to hoist in the giant? Has anyone got a crane to hoist in the giant?" The lad told us to catch hold of him, and when Jack hesitated, says he, "We've always been friends, Jack, and I want you to be one of the last to touch me." So Jack laid hold of him by one side, and Old Land's End stepped out and took him by the other. The rest of us was, by this time, kicking off our shoes and pulling off our shirts and getting our knives open in our teeth. The two men gave a great heave together, and they sent the boy clean over the top of the stockade. Oh my gosh. We heard across the river a cheer from our boats as we began to scramble. There was a pause within the fort for a few seconds, and then we saw the lad swarm up the bamboo flagstaff that swayed under him and tear down the black flag. He pulled our own flag from his breast and hung it over the top of the post. And he waved his hand and cheered, and the cheer was echoed in thunder across the river. And then a shot fetched him down, and with a wild yell they all went for him, while the cheering from the boats came like a storm. We never knew quite how we got over that stockade. To this day, I can't even imagine how we done it. But when we leaped down, we saw something lying at the foot of the flagstaff all red, and the creases was red too. The devils had done their work. But it was their last, for we came at them with our cutlasses. There was never a sound from the lips of any of us, and we drove them like a hailstorm beats down standing corn. We didn't leave a living thing there within the Red Stockade that day, and we wouldn't if there had been a million there. It was a while before we heard the shouting again, for the boats was coming up the river now that the fort was ours, and the men had other work for their breath than and the men had other work for their breath than cheering. Between us, we made a rare clearance of the pirates' nest that day. We destroyed every boat on the river, and the 2 ships that we was looking for, and the other one that was careened. We tore down and burned every house and jetty and stockade in the place, and there was no quarter for them we caught. Some of them got away by a path that they knew through the swamp where we couldn't follow them. The sun was getting low when we pulled back to the ship. It would have been a merry enough homecoming, despite our losses. All but for one thing, and that was covered up with a Union Jack in the captain's own boat. Poor lad. When they lifted him up on deck and the men came round to look at him, his face was pale enough now. And one and all, we felt that it was to make amends, and the captain stooped over and kissed him on the forehead. "We'll bury him tomorrow," he said, "but in blue water, as becomes a gallant seaman." At the dawn next day, he lay on a grating, sewed in his hammock, with the shot at his feet. And the whole crew was mustered, and the chaplain read the service for the dead. Then he spoke a bit about him, how he had done his duty, and was an example to all. He said how all loved and honored him. Then the men told off for the duty stood ready to slip the grating and let the gallant boy go plunging down to join the other heroes under the sea. But old Land's End stepped out and touched his cap to the captain and asked if he might say a word. "Say on, my man," said the captain. And he stood with his cocked hat in his hand while old Land's End spoke. "Mate, you've heard what the captain said. The boy done his duty and died like the brave gentleman he was. And we wish he was here now. But for all that, we can't be sorry for him or for what he done, though it cost him his life. I had a lad once of my own, and I hoped for him what I never wanted for myself, that he would win fame and honor and become an admiral of the fleet as others have done before. But so help me God, I'd rather see him lying under the flag as we see that brave boy lie now, and know what he was there, than I'd see him in his epaulets on the quarter deck of the flagship. He died for his queen and country, and for the honor of the flag. And what more would you have him do?" The end. And the end for our book, Dracula's Guest and Other Stories. So, yeah, I am, again, so grateful to you guys. I am just tired now. So thank you. Those of you that made it all the way through, thank you, thank you. And we'll start next week with either Irish fairy tales or the short stories of Nathaniel Hawthorne. But that is a tale for next week. I love you guys. Thank you so, so much for being here with me, and we will see you soon. Bye.